Piyush Gupta has transformed DBS into a global powerhouse, pioneered digital banking, and redefined the approach to managing world-class talent. As he steps away after 15 years at the helm, we sit down for a one-of-a-kind conversation. In this episode of the CEO Collective, we reflect on Piyush's leadership journey and the valuable lessons he leaves behind. Piyush, thanks a lot for making the time. Very excited to have this conversation with you. The intent really is to explore the true essence of you as a leader, not just only as a CEO of DBS, but also what makes you tick as an authentic leader.
I'm happy to do this.
The first thing I wanted to explore with you is this balancing act, what I call, between you've been pushing the boundaries of innovation, but at the same time being very financially prudent. And I've often seen CEOs get it wrong on one side. So in your leadership style, how do you get this balancing act right?
That's a great question. I think the two biggest challenges for most leaders are the trade-off challenges. One of them is the long-term, short-term trade-off, and the other is the risk-reward trade-off. You know, one of my ex-chairmen once said, you don't have a choice. When the music's playing, you got to get on the dance floor. So many of these calibration of risk-reward is that you must be on the dance floor, you must get your hands dirty, you must be able and willing to experiment, but you got to keep an eye on the tail risks. And you got to say, where are the tail risks that are going to really compromise either the ethics, the morality, or the fundamentals of the company? And how do you guard against those? The reality is, if you don't take risk, you don't do business. The easiest way in banking to not have any losses is not to do any business. So obviously, you need to be able to be deliberate about the kind of risks you're willing to take. And how do you actually deal with that? One approach we use is sandboxing. So we try to box certain things and say, okay, let's try it. We do a lot of experimentation, and so we experiment.
Before you go live
Before you go live at scale, so we do that to try to figure, what could go wrong, how. The other thing we do is, I like to have a lot of pokers in the fire. So,
Okay.
You do 5 or 6 things, they're all, finite size, and then 1 or 2 of them you'll say, okay, we can go big bang.
You've been at the helm of affairs of 15 years. A lot has changed in the world of banking. But there are some skills which are eternal. To be an authentic leader in a bank or otherwise, what would you say is one eternal skill which has transcended this time, which is still as relevant today as it was 15 years back?
I think there's some parts of leadership which are quite immutable, right? I mean, what do leaders do? You set a strategic agenda, so you need a strategic muscle. You create the culture in the company, and this has been there for hundreds of years. So it's your responsibility to figure what is the soul of the company going to look like. You're charged with creating an operating system and a rhythm that works. You're charged with putting a team together. So these skills are, like I said, immutable. They've been there 100 years, 50 years. They were there 15 years ago when I started. And if you get these right, strategic alignment, shaping direction, getting people to understand true north, and then march to a common rhythm, you get fantastic outcomes. It hasn't changed. I think what's changed most.
Yeah, I was going to come and ask you, what has changed, or the flip side of it?
I said 2 things. One is obviously technology. Today, technology is the business. And if you don't have a reasonable degree of comfort around what is happening in the world of technology and how you could actually bring it to bear in your business, you will lose. The other big change is the need to be nimble and adaptable.
Because it keeps evolving.
The pace of change, as you know, is just exponential. And so you have new things coming down the pike every 3-4 months. And so that's caused what I think is a fundamental shift. In the old days, the biggest thing you needed to focus on was strategy. What game do you want to play? How will you be different? And then you could do that for a period of time. Today, what happens? I mean, ChatGPT came from nowhere. And if you need to adapt to it, you got to adapt to it in weeks and months. So you have to be nimble.
So let's talk more broadly about the talent. You've got 40,000 people in the bank, roughly, give or take. And DBS has really become a magnet for great talent. It didn't get there just like that, right? And what's the playbook you've used for both identifying and nurturing this talent, which is truly authentic?
Actually, this is not rocket science. People have done that before us. But most companies have a 2-month cycle on financial planning. we have a 2-month cycle also on talent management. So middle of the year, every year, we get every one of our businesses to do a talent inventory to figure where we have good people, where we have gaps, what kind of people we might need to build in, what is our sourcing strategy. And then I review it with every business. I do 25, 30 reviews, 3 hours each, to try and figure out where the talent gaps are and where the hypos are in the system. But then on top of that, a lot of companies go through the form. We actually translate it into reality. So the top 150 people who we case manage, we then actually make the effort to move them around, to give them experiences and exposure. We created a program several years ago called 2+2 and 3+3. 2+2 is if you've been 2 years in your job and you want to move, you are welcome, not only welcome, expect you to try and find another role. And your boss is giving 2 months to let you go. So it's 2+2.
Okay.
And then beyond some seniority is 3 years and 3 months. The important thing is signaling that it's expected for you to try to move out to other parts of the company. And you have to signal not just by saying it's good, but people have to see the benefits and rewards of doing that. And so, the other thing is impact. And the other big change, it is the younger people in particular, not just Gen Z, millennials as well. They really want to make impact very early. So they're not content to say we'll be CEO in 25 years. They want to make a difference sooner. And therefore, you have to architect your whole talent program to give people the elbow room to make impact.
There's one other aspect of the operating system I want to explore. Leaders are often known for what they did, but what is not known is what they said no to. And there are many times you have to say no. Is there a defining moment you said no to something which truly shaped you, or you look back, you feel that was a path less not taken was a smart thing to do?
One, for the longest time, people kept coming to us saying, you're doing well, your currency is strong, why don't you go buy bank ABC? And there was a time when many of the big European brand banks were trading at 0.3, 0.4 times book. And therefore, if you just ran the numbers, it was always very compelling, something to do. Our view is always that numbers are only part of the story. If you want to, shape the bank in the kind of way you want to, you got to think of culture. You got to think of, what are the downside risks of merging with an entity 3-4 times the size? You got to think about, will you win the battle but lose the war? What is the war? In the case of these M&As, it was quite clear to us that the war is about redefining banking. It is to create a different kind of bank which is technology-driven and which keeps pace with the way tech is evolving. So going and buying another big bank would actually bulk you up, detract you from what the war really is, right? So I think our discipline to say no to that consistently over the years was helpful. We've done M&As, but bolt-on M&As, not a defining one which would take us away from these kinds of fundamentals. Talking about M&As, we passed on an M&A a couple of times, purely because we thought the culture wouldn't drive. The economics made sense, the numbers look good, but from looking underneath the hood, he said this is going to destroy the culture we're trying to build. So we walked away from it.
I'm going to explore some personal aspects on this. You often have talked about, or maybe talked about a little bit about this .com venture that you did and the impact it had on you as a person. So there are many leaders who've talked about some setbacks in their career and the impact they've had. So I do want to explore this facet of the importance of some kind of professional setback in building resilience, in building long-term success.
I do think you learn a lot from failing. I think one of the big differences in the US and Silicon Valley compared to the rest of the world is failure is not a stigma. In fact, I remember the standard joke, if you went to a VC to get funding, the VC would look to see how many companies have you ruined first. And if you've done 2 or 3, they'd be more inclined to fund you. In Asia, failure is a stigma. And therefore, if you fail, you go bankrupt, nobody will give you a loan. You're persona non grata. And I think that has its consequences. I think it is important to recognize that failure is a stepping stone and you can learn. In my own case, you talked about my .com, which basically didn't go anywhere. I didn't even realize it then, but years later, looking back, it gave me 2 really important things, which have been very useful. The first was it changed my appetite for risk. I thought I had hit what I thought was the bottom of the barrel. And once you've been there and seen that, you're not that concerned, how much worse can it get? So you take and start thinking about things from a different prism because you've seen the worst and the live to tell the tale. The other thing, I came back to banking after my .com, and I had a lot of reflection when I came back. I came back because I figured, hey, I'm good at banking. It's an area where I can make impact, I can make a difference. And so I came back with a shift in my mindset about why am I here and what am I trying to do. The Bhagavad Gita has this line, Nishkam Karma Yoga, which is how do you actually focus on the purpose of what you do without worrying too much about the outcomes, right? And a lot of Westerners tell you, how can you do that? You know, I mean, if you're not worried about outcomes, how do you work? And the best analogy is when you're young and you go to play, you don't go to play necessarily to win the game, you go to play. Well, if you get into the mind space where you're in the work because you're in the work and you think you can make a difference and not necessarily to win, it changes their outlook.
No, I think I love that metaphor of the Nishkam Karma as well. So I want to explore one other facet. As you look upon, as you move to the next chapter beyond DBS in some sense, and you look upon the last 15 years, if you were to pinpoint down to one thing, and I know this is a hard one, which is a legacy or a mindset that you feel you would have left at DBS, what would you call that out to?
That is not very hard. It is culture in people. Because I'm convinced the competitive advantage in today's world, tomorrow's world, will come more from how you do things and less from what you do. Because as I said before, what you do will keep changing faster and faster. So you have to build a capacity in the company to be nimble, agile, a little risk-taking, etc., etc. The DBS I inherited didn't have a lot of that. We were a solid company, but we were a little more risk-averse. We were a little more policy-driven, a little bit more bureaucratic, and as you said, we are certainly not a magnet for talent. Today, the culture of the company is quite different. It's an innovative company, it's willing to push the frontiers. People feel empowered to make impact and do things, take on challenges. That culture shift is the hardest thing to do. And I think in many ways we did well to achieve it. And therefore, today's DBS has got confidence, it's got aspiration. It's still a humble company, we're very purpose-driven. But we have the confidence to take on and adapt to changes. That's probably the most significant thing.
If you were to write a book on authentic leadership, what will be the title of that book?
Rooted, maybe.
Rooted.
I did the commencement speech for the local university a few years ago. And my whole speech was on this need to stay rooted. I think it's a very powerful concept because it's very easy to lose a sense of yourself. It's very easy to get caught up in the hype, both as an individual and as a company. Rootedness comes from clarity about your mission, your purpose, your agenda, and how it is relevant. So rootedness comes from being able to understand your relevance and staying true to that. And if you can stay true to what is relevant and then actually it's a big element of being authentic. You can talk to people all the time because you are speaking from here, because that's what you are.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I think not only what you talked about leadership, but also resilience has so many lessons, not just as a CEO of DBS, but also as just what it means to be a truly authentic leader. And I can clearly see how you can lead, inspire, and drive so much impact across such a large organization and set the tone for the industry overall. Thank you for being on the CEO Collective. It means a lot. And thank you for being candid in sharing your leadership journey.
No, thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.